Hey everybody, welcome back, part 2. So we're going to be working on numbers now for the variances. At the top we've got the direct material overall cost variance, and what you see is we've got the actual price minus the standard price times the actual quantity. That's going to kind of be your cheat sheet, this little top section here, to be able to figure these variances out. So make sure you grab those formulas and you grab them for the next section as well when we do the rate variance. But it's going to be actual for quantity variance, actual quantity minus standard quantity times standard price. Okay, so they're in your book, but they're kind of spread out in a couple of different places, so I put them all together more easily in these notes. All right, so let's give you an example of how these work. Following company produces a product that requires 2.5 standard pounds per unit. The standard price is $3.75 a pound. If 15,000 units use 36,000 pounds, which will purchase $4 a pound, with the direct material price variance, quantity variance, and the overall cost variance. Okay, so let's get my formula here, because I kind of like to repeat the formula at the top, right? So you've got the direct material. Ooh. I chose a pen that does rainbow colors. All right, price variance. Oh, it's going to take some getting used to. Maybe I won't get used to it. I might change myself over. We'll try it for this one. So anyway, price variance, you've got actual price minus standard price times actual quantity. All right, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at actual price per unit. So for one, so the actual price right here, they tell us is $4 a pound, but the standard price is $3.75. So we've got actual price of 4 minus $3.75. Now right here, I know that I paid more than I expected to. Right, I paid $4 instead of $3.75 a pound, which means I'm going to wind up with an unfavorable variance here because my actual costs were more than my standard costs. All right, so we can kind of get ahead of ourselves there by figuring that piece out. And times the actual quantity, well, it says we made 15,000 units. But that's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at pounds, right? Because we're looking at price per pound, so we're looking at pounds. And we use 36,000 pounds. So it's going to be times 36,000 to 0, which is equal to 9,000 as an unfavorable variance. So a positive number is actually unfavorable because actual costs are more than standard. So you wind up with a positive number and you wind up with a $9,000 unfavorable variance. Okay, so now let's look at the cost variance. Or rather, not cost, quantity. Quantity. We knew that wasn't going to go well, writing that out. And we'll put direct materials in front of it. And quantity is actual quantity. Now I always say I always do the formula because, like, when you look back at your notes later and you just have a page of calculations and numbers, how is that helpful, right? So I like to at least kind of set it up for myself and then see where I was getting all the numbers from, what they were. All right, so actual quantity, we already had that. It was 36,000 pounds. 36,000. And the standard quantity. Okay, so that's where you have to do a little bit of work here. The standard quantity is how much would you have expected to use? All right, so if we made 15,000 units, right, and we expected 2.5 standard pounds per unit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply these two. 15,000 times 2.5, and that is going to come out to be 37,500 pounds. All right, so the idea, like I'll say it again, if I'm making 15,000 units, what would I have expected to use in quantity? My quantity was 2.5 standard pounds per unit, so you're going to multiply those to come up with 37.5. And it's going to be times the standard price, which we know is $3.75. Right? That winds up being, this is where I cheat with my numbers, 56.25 negative, which is a favorable variance. So what you look at here is my actual quantity I used was less than what I expected to use. Great. So that means I wind up with favorable variance. I know it's a negative number, but that's okay. It's a favorable variance when it's negative, okay? So we look at these two, that's the answer to the first one, the second one, and the answer to the third one is overall, what is my direct materials variance? Well, we're going to add these two guys together, and we'll come up with 33.75 unfavorable when I add the 9,000 to 56.25. Okay, so if I step back and look at this, who would I go talk to? Well, I'd probably go talk to both departments. I'd say, all right, so the price was more than we expected it to be. Maybe, why? And if they said, well, we bought a higher quality material, well, then that kind of makes sense because I'd go down to the people in the, on the floor and say, hey, you guys did way better. Do I need to, like you didn't use anywhere near as many materials as I expected you to. What happened? And they might say, we had like no waste because the material was really good. Okay, well then that makes sense. But those are the kind of conversations that coming up with these variances drive. All right, so let's go on to the next set, which is, wait, I don't want answers in there. Hang on, I gotta pause you guys. All right, so I couldn't jump ahead and give you all the solutions, so got rid of that. But let's start talking about the cost variance. So we talked about before, rate versus time. Rate being how much you're paying people basically, and how long, and time being how long are they taking to do the job. So here we go. Bellingham Company produces a product that requires 4 standard direct labor hours a unit at a standard rate of $20 an hour. 15,000 units use 61,800. An hourly rate of $19.85. What is the direct labor rate variance and the time variance? Okay, so let's do the rate variance first. That's terrible. What if I do cursive? That may work better. No neater, but at least all my letters are there. All right, rate variance. So we said before, I like to rewrite them. Actual rate minus standard rate times actual hours. All right, so actual rate. People are being paid an hourly rate of $19.85. And the standard rate we expected to pay people is $20 an hour. So subtract those. So right now we already know we're doing better. We're going to have a negative variance, which is also a favorable variance, because we're paying people less than we expected to. So good for us. Well, not good for them, good for us. And let's look at the actual hours piece. Well, actual hours is, it took 61,800 hours. And we do the math on that. That is going to be negative 9270, which means it's a favorable variance, like I said. All right, so let's look at time. Time variance is actual hours minus standard hours times the standard rate per hour. Okay, so actual hours. Well, we know that. That's 61,800. We can grab that from the one we just did. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Undo. Or, no, undo, I said. There we go. All right, standard hours. Well, remember, standard hours is how long would I have expected it to take? Well, it was 15,000 units we made at 4 standard direct hours. So 15,000 times 4, 60,000 hours. That would be our standard hours. Now, if you mess up in here, let's say you put like 61,800 minus 4 because you thought the 4 standard hours was right, just step back from it for a second and realize that can't be right. All right, I can't tell you how many times students just put in like that 4 standard hours or whatever, and they just continue on with the problem. I'm like, does that look realistic to you? So step back from the problem, make sure it makes sense as you're putting them in. The standard rate, we said, is $20 an hour. So that winds up being a $36,000 unfavorable variance, which makes sense because people took way more time than you expected them to. So maybe it was that you hired less skilled workers, paying them less money, and they took longer to do the job. That would be a pretty reasonable explanation. And the overall variance together is those two, 26,730 when we add these two together, and that would be unfavorable. Okay, so that's kind of it, but for this chapter, but there is, I just want to kind of give you a heads up. There's 2 homework problems that students tend to have difficulty with. So I'm just going to call out just the places I've seen there be problems. Okay, so I don't put the whole thing on screen because the solution is below. But if you're doing this problem for homework, this is one of the ones I see students have difficulty with. What they have trouble with is coming up with the actual price. All right, so if we're doing actual price for this problem, take your time, read through it. That's terrible. Actual price. Sorry about that, that's awful. But actual price. The actual price for this is you have 600 LCD displays were purchased at a cost of $8,550. So the actual price we'd be looking at for just one, it'd be $8,550 divided by 600. And that's going to give you the actual price of $14.25. And what you're doing is you're comparing it to the standard price, which is in here somewhere. $15. That's your standard price. So that's what you're comparing it against. But that getting to that $14.25 is the hard part in this problem, from what I've seen. And I feel like there's one other one. Nope, I'm going to let you guys do the other ones on your own. All right, so good luck, and well, I hope I'll see you next chapter.